Hi guys, so in this video I'll be discussing the crystal field theory in coordination complexes, and we'll see the application of crystal field theory in octahedral complexes in particular. So this is the fourth video in this coordination chemistry series. So let's get started. So crystal field theory was given by Van Vleck and Bethe, and why it is known as crystal field theory? First of all, it was applied first in ionic crystals, that is why the word crystal, and field because it considers field generated by both metal and the ligands. So when we are talking about field, that means there are some charges involved, and that is one of the assumptions of crystal field theory. It considers ligands to act as point charges. In earlier valence bond theory, we have seen that ligands are considered as molecules which have orbitals and all those things, but here they are considered as single point charges. But that is not for metals. Metals have orbitals, but in case of ligands only, they are considered as point charges. And when you are considering point charges, you are considering purely electrostatic interaction with the metal ion. So there is some positive charge on the metal ion and there is some negative charge on the ligands. So ligands have negative charge, or metals have positive charge, and the only kind of interaction between them is electrostatic interaction. That means ionic interaction. Next assumption is that there is no role of overlap of orbitals here. So in case of valence bond theory, we have seen that the metal orbitals undergo hybridization to form hybrid orbitals which undergo overlap with the ligand orbitals. But here in this case, there is no question of overlap because we are only considering the ligands as point charges. And the fourth one is not a consequence. It's more. Fourth one is not an assumption. More of it is as a consequence of crystal field theory. So crystal field theory comes to the result that in complexes, whether it's octahedral, square planar, or it's tetrahedral, what happens is that the degeneracy of the d orbital is lost. Now, what do I mean by that? So, in valence bond theory, you have seen that all the 5 d orbitals remain in the same energy level. There is no difference in the energy of any of the 5 d orbitals. But in case of crystal field theory, the degeneracy is lost. That means there is a difference between the energy levels now. So not all the d orbitals are at the same energy level, and depending on what kind of difference is created, we get different type of complexes, and this phenomenon is known as splitting. Splitting means the differentiation of the 5 d orbitals in 2 different energy levels or more number of different energy levels, and that is what happens in octahedral cases. So from now here we'll start how crystal field theory explains the properties of octahedral complexes. So if you remember, the drawbacks of valence bond theory were particularly no explanation for the color spectra, no explanation for temperature dependence of magnetic properties, no explanation for certain special type of complexes, like we would expect tetrahedral complex but we used to get square planar complex, or we would expect square planar complex but we get tetrahedral complexes. So why such kind of properties are being shown by molecule or by complexes? Some of them are explained by ligand field, some of them explained by crystal field theory. Okay, so before we jump into what is splitting, how splitting is occurring, we need to see the shapes of the 5 d orbitals that we know. So starting with d x square minus y square. Now d x square minus y square, all the orbitals are pointed along the axis. So you have x and y axis and the orbitals are along those axes. Dz square has orbitals only along z axis. There are no orbitals along xy axis. Now this is dxy, where the orbitals are in between the axis, or we can say the orbitals are in the plane of xy. So they are in the xy plane. Similarly for dxz, they are in the xz plane, and for dyz, they are in the yz plane, or in between the yz axis. Now, in an octahedral complex, you would expect the ligands to approach through all the 3 axes, x, y, and z. Now, when this is happening, out of all of these 5 orbitals, which are the orbitals that you expect will have the closest approach to these ligands? So, along x and y direction, obviously you will get x square minus y square, which will be facing the ligands more closely, and along the z direction, dz square. Now, suppose the ligand is coming from this side, the orbital which is along this axis will be facing the ligand more closely than with respect to this. So this will be facing by half the diagonal distance, but this will be facing directly. So now, as I told you, for crystal field theory, we consider ligand as point charges. They are having negative charge, and in metal d orbitals, electrons are placed. So they also have negative charge. So there is a negative repulsive interaction, and due to repulsive interaction, we know energy of the system increases. So those orbitals which are facing the ligands more closely will have higher energy as compared to those orbitals which are not facing the ligands directly. So suppose you have these 5d orbitals and ligands are approaching in the metal ion through the 3 axis, you would expect the energy of the system to increase. Now, since there are 2 different types of orbitals who are 2 different types in which the orbitals are facing the ligands, so you will get 2 different set of orbitals. So the ones which are facing head on, which are facing more closely, will have higher energy, which are namely dx square minus y square and dz square. And those which are not facing them closely will have another set, namely dxy, dyz and dxz. Now, it's true that they have energy lower than dx square minus y square, but in no case their energy will be lower than the free state, because on free state there is no interaction. Even though their energy is low, even though they are not facing the ligands head on, but still there is some interaction, repulsive interaction, because of which their energy will increase. Okay. Now the 2 sets of orbitals, the term symbols for them are T2G, and for this it is EG. Now these are known as doubly degenerate and T2G is known as triply degenerate. Okay. Now the weighted center of this splitting is known as barycenter, and this energy difference is known as delta O or dq. Now this dq full form is differential quanta, which is also equals to d. Okay, so this is 10 dq. Okay, now delta O is the crystal field splitting. And why is the word field here again? Because these orbitals are getting splitted when they are in the field generated by the point charges, which are ligands. Okay, now fine. So some of the energy levels are getting higher, some of the energy levels are getting lower. The total has to be delta naught. So those orbitals, for the EG orbitals, we consider the contribution from each orbital to be equals to plus 0.6 delta naught, and for T2G orbitals we consider the contribution from each orbital to be negative 0.4 delta naught. Now if you see, we want this weighted mean. If you consider the total contribution, you have 2 EG orbitals and you have 3 T2G orbitals. So you get one positive 1.2 delta naught and negative 1.2 delta naught. You will get 0. That means you will get this barycenter. So that is why you get the contribution for each of the EG and T2G orbitals in this magnitude. Okay, let's say for example you have a complex Ti H2O whole 6 3 plus. The electronic configuration is D1. So that means you have one electron here. And how do you find this delta O or delta naught? That means the crystal field splitting. You measure that using UV visible spectra. Now what happens in UV visible spectra? There is transition among the electronic energy levels. So this transition will occur, and in the spectra you will find there is a peak like this. Now the maximum of this is at 20300 centimeter inverse, and the corresponding value in kilojoules per mole will give you the order of the splitting. So this much amount of energy is required to excite the electron from T to G orbital to EG orbitals, and that is what is the crystal field splitting for this particular complex. Okay, now let us take a look at the various factors which decide the amount of splitting that will be happening. Okay, so now what are the entities which are involved in a splitting or in a complex? Namely the metal and the ligand. So all the factors which decide the magnitude of the splitting or the magnitude of delta naught will depend only on the metal and the ligand. So for example, you have now in a metal, the first property which affects the splitting is the oxidation state or the charge. So higher the charge on a metal, higher will be the electrostatic interaction, since in crystal field theory the interaction between ligand in metal is purely electrostatic. As the positive charge on the metal increases, the interaction increases and the ligands come much closer to the metal. So the d orbitals are facing the ligands much closely, more destabilization occurs, splitting increases. So as the oxidation state or charge increases, delta naught increases. Then we have size of metal in a period. So as you go from left to right, the size decreases. So for the same oxidation state, as the size is decreasing, the density of the charge increasing. As the charge density increases, again the interaction with the ligands will be stronger. Stronger interactions, they come more closer, more destabilization occurs in d orbitals and splitting increases. So again, in this case, splitting increases. And the third is the size of metal in a group. So from top to bottom, size increases. Now, if in this case, the decrease of size is causing an increase in charge density, you would expect as the size is increasing, the charge density should decrease and splitting should be less. But in this case, there is another factor which is acting, that as the size increases, the size of the d orbital also increases. So suppose this was one case where ligand was here, the ligand is still there, but the orbitals can approach the ligand much closely. As they are approaching the ligand much closely, more destabilization occurs and delta naught increases. So this is all about the factors from the metal. Now ligand. Now in case of ligand, certain ligands are able to cause more splitting, certain ligands are able to cause less splitting. And depending on that, they are classified as strong ligand, less splitting will be weak ligand. And a series is made known as spectrochemical series of all the common types of ligand. Why the word spectrochemical? Because it is causing a splitting which is measured using UV visible spectra, which is again a spectral property, and it is also causing some changes in the chemical properties. That is why it's spectrochemical series. And what is the series? The series is like this. Okay. Now in this series, starting from halide to ammonia, they are known as weak ligands. From ethylene diamine to NO2, they are known as moderate ligands. And from CH3 minus to NO plus, they are known as strong ligand. Now, how do you remember the series? Now, a lot of textbooks and a lot of different channels give you some tricks and tips to remember these, but I would suggest you to look at the chemistry behind it. In that way, it will be much easier to remember. So, if you take a look at the ligands still here, they are either halides or pseudo-halides. Then from hydroxide to water, they are all oxygen donor ligands. That means they are donating through oxygen. From glycine to NO2 minus, they are all nitrogen donors. And lastly, all of these are carbon donors with the exception of NO plus in PR3. So you can say that halides come first, then oxygen donors, then nitrogen donors and carbon donors. And this series is actually the sigma donorability. So depending on the strength of sigma donation, the spectrochemical series can be classified as halides, oxygen donors, nitrogen donors and carbon donors. And in this way, you can actually remember the order of the different ligands that are present in the spectrochemical series. Okay, so these are the factors from the ligands. Now, depending on these factors, the splitting occurs. So, say for example, you have a D4 complex. That means there are 4 electrons in the d orbitals of the metal. So, there are 2 possibilities for the electronic configurations that pairing occurs, and another is that pairing is not occurring. Now, in this case, you have 2 unpaired electrons, and in this case, there are 4 unpaired electrons. So they have more higher spin. So these are known as high spin complex and these are known as low spin complex. That means complexes where pairing is occurring is known as low spin and the complexes where pairing is not occurring is known as high spin. Now what do you mean by pairing? Pairing means when there is a option that you can fill the electron at higher energy level, but still you choose to fill the electron at lower energy level, that is known as pairing. Don't confuse it with this, that if you have say 6th electron coming. So this is the D6 complex. Suppose you want to fill the next electron, by any way you have to fill it here. This is not pairing. This is the normal method of filling up of electrons. But in case of D4 and D5, you see there was a possibility or there was an option to fill the electrons at EG, but you did not do that. Instead, you filled it up at T2G only. That means you are doing a pairing. Now, when will pairing occur and when will pairing not occur? So, pairing means, as you could see, you are doing a pairing when you had an option. That means because of this pairing, 2 electrons reside in the same orbital. And in order to do so, some amount of work has to be done by the metal ion. That means some amount of energy is utilized, which is known as pairing energy. P. Now, pairing energy is an inherent or fundamental property of the metal ion. It depends on the metal ion. Now, the splitting is occurring because of the ligand. So, if pairing energy depends on the metal ion, the only factor which is now remaining is delta naught. Now, depending on delta naught, pairing may occur or pairing may not occur. Say for example, delta naught is greater than pairing energy. That means the amount of splitting that is caused is much more than the pairing energy that the complex has to use or the complex has to lose. So that means if an electron goes to the higher energy level, the destabilization is larger or the loss of energy is larger than the pairing that can be caused. So in that case, pairing will happen. So here pairing occurs and you get a low spin complex. But in case delta naught is less than pairing energy, so that means if you put an electron in the EG orbitals, so the loss of energy will be less than the amount that will be lost if you do pairing. So in that case, pairing, no pairing, and you get a high spin complex. Okay. So this is all about the factors on which splitting depends and what is pairing energy. Okay, so how do you calculate crystal field stabilization energy? So crystal field stabilization energy will be some amount of delta naught plus pairing. Now this pairing will be applicable only in case of D4 and D5, right? In all other cases there will be no other pairing. Say for example you have D6, so even if you put it here, you have to put another electron here, and this pairing is not optional. That means even if you had a high spin complex, this would have been here and this pairing would be made. So that means pairing energy comes only for D4 and D5. In D4 it is P, in D5 it is 2P. Okay. So now we'll look at some of the electronic configurations and some facts based on octahedral complexes. Then we'll move on to the question which have come in net gate and T alpha. Now let us look at the configurations of the different metal ions that we different possibilities that we have for, let's say, D1, D2, D3. For these complexes, there is no question of high spin or low spin. They will always be a same. They will always follow this this pattern. So you have T2G1 EG0 or T2G2 EG0 or T2G3 EG0. Similarly, if you have D4, D5, D6 and D7. Now in case of D4 to D7, there is a possibility of either forming a high spin or a low spin complex. And how? Say for example, you have a high spin complex for D5 like this, or you have a low spin complex for D5. So it will be this. Now, depending on the value of or magnitude of the splitting, it may be high spin or low spin. Now, for the electronic configuration in this case will be EG3, T2G3, EG2, and for this case it will be T2G5, EG0. I would suggest you to find the CFSE for all of these, and D8, D9, D10. Again in D8, D9, D10, there is no question of high spin and low spin. It will always have only one possibility, is this for D8. Similarly D9 and D10. Now if you find the CFSEs for all of the configurations, you would realize that D0, D5 high spin and D10, they have CFSE 0. Apart from these three, all of the other combinations have CFSE less than 0. That means some negative magnitude. That means they are gaining some stability because of the CFSE. That means they are thermodynamically more favorable. Because of which the lattice energies of these complexes is less than calculated from Bond-Lande equation. Now this is one of the things we'll see later in the lecture series, why this is happening and what is the contribution of CFSE in this. Okay. Now here are some facts which you should remember, which will help you in approaching the questions that have come. First of all, octahedral complexes of cyanide are always low spin. Now if you remember the spectrochemical series, cyanide, CO and NO plus comes as the most strong ligands. So they will cause such a high splitting that complexes will always be low spin. Then you have octahedral complexes of oxidation state +4, always low spin. Again, as the oxidation state increases, splitting increases, so the complexes will be low spin. Then you have octahedral complexes of 4D and 5D metals, always low spin. Down the group, as we have seen, splitting increases, so it is low spin. Dipositive that means plus 2 charge, 3D metal octahedral complexes are high spin for ligands iodide to ammonia pyridine. That means for the weak ligands, 3D metals in plus 2 oxidation state will form octahedral complexes which are high spin. That means the splitting is not so high. Cobalt plus 3 forms high spin complexes for halides and pseudohalides. So these are some facts which you can remember, which will help you in solving a lot of questions. So the most recent question that we have is from GATE 2019, and the question says the delta naught value of NiH2O whole 6 is 8500 centimeter inverse, and they have asked you what will be the delta naught value of NiCl6 4 minus and NiNH3 whole 6 2 plus with respect to the given one. So if you remember the spectrochemical states, okay, so before that we have to check the oxidation states, which is plus 2 in all, and the electronic configuration is D8, so there is no question of high spin or low spin. Now if you remember the spectrochemical series, the strength was in the order of chloride, water, and then ammonia. So the splitting that will be occurring, you would expect it to be in the order of this, which is given in your option number B. This one lower and this one higher. Okay. So the next question you have is from TIFR 2018. And the question says, identify the high spin complex amongst the choices given below. And the choices are CONH3 whole 6, 3 plus, COCN whole 6, 3 minus, and COF6, 3 minus. Now if you see this last statement which says cobalt plus 3 forms high spin complexes only for halides and pseudohalides, so the correct option is option number C. Okay, so the next question we have is from GATE 2017, and it says the delta naught of is the octahedral splitting energy and P is the electron pairing energy. Then the CFSE of CONH3 whole 6 2 plus. So that means 2 plus means it is D7. Now as you have seen that for dipositive 3D metals, for iodide to ammonia, it forms high spin complexes. So you would expect its electronic configuration to be T2G 5Eg2. CFSE would be 5 into negative 0.4 plus 2 into 0.6, which is negative 0.8 delta naught. There will be no pairing energy because after half filled, as I told you, after half filled, this is the normal way that the next electron will be filled. So there is no pairing energy for this configuration, and this is given in your option number C. So the next question we have is from GATE 2016, and as you can see, a lot of questions have come in GATE and TIFR from this very basic topic of crystal field theory. So I would suggest to practice as many questions as you can. If the question says the magnitude of the difference in the crystal field stabilization energy in delta naught, and you have to ignore the pairing energy, and the complexes are FeH2O whole 6 2 plus and FeCN whole 6 4 minus. Both are in plus 2 state, and you have to find the difference in the CFSE. So the CFSE for this, okay, so this will cause a low spin complex, okay, iron is d6 here, so all of the electrons here, and this will form a high spin complex. CFSE for this will be negative 0.4 delta naught, and for this it will be negative 2.4 delta naught. And if you see the difference, so the difference in CFSE will be negative 0.4 plus 2.4, which is 2.0 delta naught, and this is the correct answer for this. Okay, so this is all about crystal field theory, application of crystal field theory in octahedral complexes. In the next video, we'll discuss the crystal field theory in square planar tetrahedral complexes, and we'll see the questions that have come from these two topics.